Guerilla cricket. Whoa, guerilla cricket. Whoa, guerilla. Take guard, man the barricades, patrol the...
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Guerilla Cricket World Cup preview podcast. What could be more exciting than that? And alongside me, Guerilla Hendo, we have a fine band of freedom fighters. We have the Bear.
G'day.
All the way from southeast London.
Yeah.
We have Aatif Nawaz, all the way from Wembley Park via Lahore. And we have the walking wisdom himself, wine merchant, and various other things. We have Manny Cohen, a rare appearance from
Good
Manny
afternoon.
Cohen. It's good to see you. Now,
How
we
are
have
you,
got
chap?
so many things to talk about because it's a very, very exciting period that we're coming into. 49 days, 44 days, 49 games of cricket, of which we're covering 20. Now, the thing is, a lot of people have been doing down this World Cup. They've been doing down World Cups for a while, haven't they? Because it's the format, various things like that. And I saw the other day in, I think, a piece by Steve James in The Telegraph, where he said that journalists and players dread the World Cup. And then, apparently, Duncan Fletcher said it was the most boring period of his time in cricket, the World Cup, and it's too long. It's too long. It can be a letdown. There's too few teams. There's too many teams. Tell me, please, give me something to get me excited about this World Cup, Manny.
I think when you get down to the knockout stages, it will be. I think if you were looking at the format of it, comparing that to the Champions Trophy, I think the Champions Trophy is better, which is a shame because this is the World Cup and it should be the Premier Tournament, and it is the Premier Tournament, but there's an awful lot of preamble to actually get to the meat of the... and you just think to yourself, with a possible exception of one, you think we probably know 7 of the 8 teams in the quarterfinals. So that's an awful lot of cricket to be played to get something that we already know. So I think that's a downside of it. But once we get to the quarterfinals, I think it will be very exciting.
That said, of course, Aatif, the first weekend is full of exciting matchups, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
England, Australia, India, Pakistan. What could be a more exciting opening than that? It's fireworks all around,
It's
isn't
been
it?
ages since we've seen England, Australia.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course, of course.
You know what?
Good 10 minutes.
Yeah. So I'm going to back up what Manny said. I think what makes this World Cup exciting is that, in theory, anybody could win it. Because of the way the format breaks down. Obviously, the group stages, there's going to be a little bit of predictability to it. But even so, there's loads of little games where you suspect there could be, result could go a certain way. I mean, we were talking just before this about how the West Indies have deteriorated as a team recently, and they're not quite what they used to be. Which means it opens it up to some of the associates. I mean, Ireland will have a good crack at them, as you intimated earlier, Manny. I think Afghanistan have had a really interesting approach to the World Cup as well. I don't mind seeing UAE involved in this picture. So the associates are all very credible. They've all got a decent shot at creating the odd upset, and we will see them. There's going to be a lot of close games, a lot of exciting games, and when it gets to that knockout stage, anybody could win it.
Wasn't it exciting to see the fact that I looked on Cricket Info yesterday, Bear, and saw that Scotland had absolutely mullered Ireland. What's going on there?
Paul Collingwood, isn't it?
Yeah, is it the collie factor?
It could well be. I mean, I kind of, what Manny was saying, I mean, basically the ICC Champions Trophy is the knockout stages of the World Cup, which is why some people prefer it, because basically you get rid of all the crap at the beginning. However, having said that, we're in Australia. The wickets, there'll be big runs in Australia because the wickets are conducive for big runs. It's not going to be like a subcontinental thing where it's all going to be about the bowlers and slow, low wickets and dew and all this kind of stuff. It's going to be hard, fast wickets, hopefully. There'll be big runs. It'll be exciting cricket. South Africa have got a chance once again. Could choke. What got me excited was I was reading an article in The Guardian about South Africa and de Villiers, and you suddenly thought, yeah, you know what, I haven't seen South Africa play any sort of cricket for a while because we've been doing this and we've been covering everything else but South Africa. So we're going to see all the teams. It's going to be exciting. Chris Gayle can be explosive. West Indies look down and out already. But
that's what set you off reading about South Africa. Suddenly from a state of sort of rather maudlin acceptance of what was coming, you then were buoyed by this one article about South Africa.
Yeah, it just made me think, actually, it's the World Cup. But the thing is, we watch endless one-day back to and so's at the end of a test series, and it actually mean nothing. It's just fill time, get some bums on seats, make money. The World Cup, when it gets to knockout stages, there's going to be a victor, and it's an actual competition that means something. So whilst everyone gets bored at the beginning, towards the end, everyone's going to get really excited. So
I also think it's a sort of process that needs to probably happen once every 4 years, because cricket's a small enough club, or internationally a small enough club as it is. You've got to have some sort of carrot or incentive to the smaller nations, and it would be great for cricket, world cricket, I would suggest, if we do have one or two upsets. If Kenya have beaten a major team in the past.
A World Cup semi-finalists.
Well, but Ireland
They were, weren't they? That's
indeed.
right.
Ireland have beaten
Pakistan, yes, in
That's right.
2007.
yeah, I'm sure you remember.
Yeah. Vividly.
So, I mean, and it would be great if that can happen. Afghanistan might surprise us. And look, wouldn't that be a great good news story for many and varied reasons if they won a couple of games against the big boys? So I think it's necessary to have all these other countries, the associates in there, to give them that incentive to say, well, have a go at the big boys, and good luck to you if you manage to succeed.
Well, we'll come back to the minnows later on, because there's quite a bit to say about them. But do you not think that perhaps this World Cup, the trouble with this World Cup is it's like a one-day international in miniature in a way, because you have a very exciting opening, England, Australia, Pakistan, India, then perhaps you have a bit of boring middle section, and then it gets exciting again in the world when the quarterfinals come along. Is that how we should see it, or not really?
Yeah, I guess I suppose you could, but I mean, you're discounting a lot of exciting players in the middle. I think a lot of the World Cup, the excitement of the World Cup, is going to come from pitting big stars against each other. A Chris Gayle versus an A.B. de Villiers, a Rohit Sharma versus a Shahid Afridi. And there's going to be a lot of these mini contests that are going to make the game very exciting. And I don't doubt at all that there will be some flat one-day internationals in between. It's inevitable. There's 48 games, 49 games. So obviously there's going to be a few games that are duds. But overall, I'm expecting to see very exciting cricket. The pitches in Australia tend to be good for cricket. They're not going to be slow, low, awkward ones. They're going to be the kind of pitches that are going to back. You're both taking notes while I'm saying this now.
It's okay, no, it's okay.
It frightened me a little bit.
No.
It's like a deposition. So anyway, so this is the thing. So I like the I like the idea that there's a sense of equality in terms of the conditions, and people can prepare for it the same way. I think there's going to be exciting matches across the board, and there's going to be games that will surprise you. The games you don't expect to be exciting that are actually going to be the talk of the town.
So, Bear, should we be reading anything into results from the warm-up tournament? It's not a tournament as such, is it? We've had Scotland beat Ireland, we've had England massacre the West Indies, and we've had didn't we see Sri Lanka losing to Zimbabwe? Didn't we? We've just seen that, and so. I mean, a lot of those games, they've had 15 against 15. They've involved the whole squad. So should we read very much into
I don't
those
think
things?
we should read too much into it. I mean, 50-over cricket is an extended version of 20-over cricket. 20-over cricket is more unpredictable. 50-over cricket is kind of predictable, but you're still going to get unpredictable results. And then Test cricket is obviously the premier form of the game as far as we're concerned, where the best team should always win. But in limited overs cricket, for example, I was just thinking about this when you were talking about Afghanistan. I haven't seen Afghanistan play, but we all know when they're in the T20, how they're going to play is they're going to go and try and blast it out of the ground. They're going to tee off and the thing. Now, the chances are against most teams, they're going to fail. But in that one game against, I don't know, it could be
England.
West Indies, could be against us. Probably us. We've lost to the bloody Holland twice in limited overs competitions. They could tee off against us and score 320. Some guy gets lucky, scores a big 100. And then we're going to screw it all up because the pressure's on us,
What do you think, Manny?
So there's always that chance.
I think that's true. The other factor I'd just lob into the mix as well is a bit, people saying, well, it's all going to take place in Australia. Don't forget, I mean, quite a few, certainly New Zealand group games are all taking place in New Zealand. And I think, obviously it's further south, and their pitches are more akin to English pitches, possibly sort of early season. Can you tell the difference between the outfield and the wickets sometimes, and their green tops? And I wouldn't be at all surprised if they do have a few seaming wickets, which will favour New Zealand because they know their own conditions. And I think, if you're looking for value, I think that they represent good value because I think they're an excellent fielding outfit. They'll be playing all their group games at home. They know the conditions well. Their batting is good-ish, but I think they've got a good seam attack.
I know they've been camped in New Zealand for the last month and a half or so, haven't they? And basically they've taken on Sri Lanka, 7 ODIs at home. If they're not used to their conditions by now, they never will be.
And I don't see a better fielding outfit in the tournament. Maybe South Africa is good, but I don't think they'd be probably equal best. But I think they're going to take a lot of beating, particularly at home.
Well, that moves us on to talking about the teams individually. And I suppose as well, Aatif accepted, he's not really an England fan. I suppose a little bit of an England fan, yes. Yeah,
When
England
Pakistan's
fan
not
after
playing.
Pakistan.
10 test failure.
Indeed. When we look at the teams involved in here, and we look at England in particular, I mean, we sat through that awful series in Sri Lanka before Christmas, and England lost 5-2. The only good thing that came out of it, really, as most people would regard it, is that it managed to get Alistair Cook out of the frame. Now, people are coming along and saying, "Ooh, whisper it quietly," but England have got a bit of a chance here. Have they really, Ben?
I think we've got a puncher's chance.
A puncher's chance?
Yeah, I mean...
What's that in...
What is a
what's that in
Well, a
layman's
puncher's
terms?
chance is someone who's got a big right hook in a boxing match. He's completely
right.
outclassed.
Right.
However, if he gets that one punch in, he's going to knock the guy out, you know. And I think in the World Cup, you basically get through the quarters, you've got to win 3 games. We all know that. And in that situation, you've got a puncher's chance. I mean, if you look at our batting, actually, from complaining about how crap we were, it kind of suddenly has materialised as looks quite reasonable. There's a couple of big hitters in there. You've got Joe Root and little Jimmy Taylor, who can also hit big, but they're very good at working the ball around in the middle orders. You've also got Owen Morgan, if he comes off, hits it large. You're opening with Moeen Ali, he can go large, and which takes the pressure off Ian Bells to be the guy who has to go from the off. And if he gets in, you know, we all know he's quite classy. You've got Butler at 7.
Vice captain, but
Yeah.
We'll come back to that in a minute, but carry on.
And, you know, Ravi Bop at 6. And then you've got Wokes, who's an all-rounder. You know, we all know Broad can hit it, but I mean, if you get down that far, you're in trouble. But if they're in the last 2 overs and you're batting first, then you've probably got a decent score on the board, you know.
Well, coming back to this notion of the warm-up games, I mean, like in last night's game, Pakistan v England, Alex Hales got an outing as opener. Got 31, didn't do badly. Is there a case for Alex Hales slipping into the order somewhere and Ravi Bopara, who hasn't really set the world alight at any point, perhaps dropping out, especially because he doesn't seem to be using him as a bowler very much?
No.
Well, yeah, I mean, I take Bear's point. I mean, I think that's probably a fair appraisal, you know, a decent puncher's chance. They look a far better side, obviously, without Cook there. And I just think their body language as well looks far better because they were going around with this burden around their neck, both on and off the pitch, of Alistair Cook, and it was the elephant in the room. And look, I think it's been a relief to him as well to be relieved of that. So I think the Sri Lankan tour was actually of benefit to England because it clarified that. So I think they're playing with more confidence. They've got a fairly settled order. I think they bat well and reasonably long, without any world class. I think their weakness would be their backup seam bowling. Yes, Broad, yes, Anderson. They've got Ringcraft there and a lot of experience. So I think they'll do well enough. What I would like to see them do is, because I don't see their backup seamers, maybe Finn, a bit more bounce in Australia, but somebody like Wokes I think is definitely hittable. I think they look a better balanced side when they go in and have 2 bowlers taking pace off it. I'd drop Bopara because I don't see they're not using him, and I'd look, if they can, you've got Moeen Ali at the top of the order who can bowl spin, but also use Treadwell taking pace off, and I think that's probably their best chance. And the other thing I'd say as well, in some of their warm-up games, their body language has translated into the fact that they're, I mean, like all good sides, once they start playing well, they start fielding well and taking good catches. And there's just, I wouldn't say I wouldn't go and stick my mortgage on them, but Bear's point of, get through the quarterfinals, then you've only got to win 3 games. They're not without a chance. That's all I'd say.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I was reading the other day that we have compartmentalised so much of the one-day game that we even have now specialist death bowler coaches. Do you read about that?
Well, if they are, and they're English, they're doing a shit job. because, I mean, that's the one thing that we have to come on to now. I mean, England's death bowling has been atrocious. This bloody half-track slow ball nonsense is going to get carted, and it's been all over the papers. Everyone knows we do it, and I don't know whose idea it is, but it clearly doesn't bloody work. Because if you bowl basically a long hop, slow long hop, anyone who sees it coming, and if they set the field, I mean, there was one person, it was... I was driving around in the car and they had Vaughan and Jason Gillespie on, and they were talking about death bowling. Yeah. And they were talking about the fact that England, in the death overs, they keep to go and huddle after every ball to talk about their fielding change, which kind of telegraphs to the batsman what sort of ball they're going to bowl. Right. And a lot of it is for this slow ball nonsense. And so the batsman's kind of ready for it. And someone like Faulkner, for example, who's just going to sit on the back foot, wait for this slow half dolly down the middle of the track and then clout it over mid-wicket for 6.
Yeah, Faulkner and Maxwell, they scare you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fine to produce a slower bouncer every now and again, but if you're constantly doing it, then you get the rhythm becomes right for you as a batsman, doesn't it?
It does, and they also they're putting in so many eggs in that one particular basket. I mean, what they would like would be a class left armour, because of the angle they get. It's far more difficult whether they're bowling over and around the wicket. It presents far more of a problem to batsmen at the end of an innings. Now, they haven't got one, or not one of good enough class to include one. But there was a time, I mean, Stuart Broad did it for a while, where he would bowl round the wicket and slanted across them, set his field accordingly, obviously offside, and hang it outside off stump and said, OK, fair enough, there's all my cover of that side. Even go sort of 7-2 offside. And I think that is a better plan, and a bit of variety as well, rather than, as you say, let's have this telegraph, flashing neon light above my head. I'm now going to bowl you what we would call in club cricket a filthy great long hop.
Yeah, exactly.
What happened to the Yorkers? That's
Yeah.
what there was a time where all you do in the death.
You're
Darren Gough
deeply
was
old-fashioned,
amazing, right?
aren't you, darling?
Well, I know, but right, Darren Gough. Just go back to Darren Gough,
Yeah.
Wakar Yunus. These guys, they bowl classic Yorkers, make it difficult to get.
But
the ball
hasn't
out.
what's happened now? You have batsmen who are skilled in going very, very deep into their crease.
Yeah.
So they're turning those Yorkers, or potentially those Yorkers, into half volleys.
Well, if
However-
you're a death bowl
however-
coach, you should know that. You should. That's what you should be preparing for, rather than slow bouncers. Which, if you're a seam bowler, a quick seam bowler, a slow bouncer just makes you hit the ball shortly. It negates all of your threat.
But surely as well, with a Yorker, if it goes wrong, or the guy in the crease goes deep, the length of a bouncer dictates pretty much. The length of a Yorker is going to dictate where it's going to go in the field. So I think it's much easier to set a field for. Well, a slow ball bouncer is just going to go over mid-wicket for 6 anyway. But if they get it wrong, I'm not so sure. But with a Yorker, if it's right up there, they either skew it and it goes out third or square on the offside. They dig it out and it goes straight, or they're going to fall over and whip it and it's going to go square and behind square on the leg side. And those are defendable positions.
But also, isn't it the thing about if you get Yorkers wrong, not only, what I was going to say, we get Yorkers wrong, you end up bowling a load of low full tosses, and those.
They're hard to hit.
They probably are harder to hit than a short.
Yeah, I think we've also got to give credit to, as you've touched on, the batsmen are far more inventive. Year on year on year, the batsmen are more and more inventive. So there's more and more pressure on bowlers every year to get it right, and bigger bats, and they now have bats made for them where, particularly towards the end of the innings, they may change their bat because the sweet spot is going near the bottom of the bat if they think they're going to get the Yorker. So they're going to have all the way to the bottom of the bat, so they can get that low full toss and stick it out the ground.
And that is also the thing, isn't it?
There's the ramp shot as well.
You've got that in the bottom of your bat, and your hand would be ringing for the next 5 overs.
Switch hits, reverse.
I mean, that
swing,
is incredible, isn't it? The power in these bats. I mean, not just in. I mean, you look at, say, like David Warner, you look at Glenn Maxwell, people like that, and they've got fantastic hand speed. But at the same time, you look at it, and sometimes you see them leading edge the ball through the covers of a 4.
Yeah.
And so you basically have got these. The depth of the bats now is just so extreme, and the middle is so big.
Yeah.
That.
The sweet spot is huge.
And it's confusing to people like us who played when this didn't happen.
With
And
the
you
leg of
just
a
think, how
chair.
are these people? I mean, just think, how many more runs would we have scored? It's
Why
like,
isn't the silly mid-off taking that catch? But no, I'm with you. I just think, in order to, if a batsman can outfox you and play that inventive cricket, that's fine. Then you give it to him.
Right.
But if you're not getting your fundamentals right, you can't use that as an excuse. Oh, if I did get my fundamentals right, then he probably just look. AB de Villiers can do that. Maxwell can do that. Warner. There's loads of cricketers who do play inventive cricket now, but they all don't. Especially when you're up against. I want to see England when they play the Associates to get that death bowling right. That's their opportunity to go back to basics. See what they're paying these extra coaches for.
But I think almost they're overthinking it, and you do need to strip it back to some basics. And it was I think Clive Woodward came up with thinking clearly under pressure. And I'm not sure. Yeah, well, it was good, isn't it? You can remember, but it is good. Thinking clearly under pressure. I mean, it's in any game. It's very important because you will get serious moments. And if you can actually think to yourself, okay, fair enough. And sometimes, okay, you've got to try and outguess the batsman if they're going to go and try and play the scoop shot and whatever else. But it's not a bad idea to actually go back to basics and say, full and straight, okay, if he, as Aatif said, if he's good enough to do something ridiculous and ping you out the ground, so what? But if he misses, you hit. LBW and bowl comes into play. It's not a bad theory, bowling full and straight.
No,
I thought the
very
very,
good
the very
theory.
thought of thinking, as a if I was a bowler and I thought to myself, thinking clearly under pressure, I'd suddenly feel under so much pressure that I would.
Yeah, but that's you, Henry, that's
the more
you.
if you start thinking about these little acronyms and whatever.
Tea, you're thinking about actual cups of tea, aren't you?
I
Not
am.
just
Well,
teacups.
no,
Yeah,
He'll be
indeed.
thinking of donuts.
Well, great, darling. Wonderful.
Well, let's talk about innovative batsmen. Well, we have been talking about innovative batsmen, and I suppose the most innovative one of the most innovative in the England team is Jos Buttler. And the extraordinary news in the last couple of days that he's been appointed vice captain. He's leapt over Stuart Broad. He's leapt over Joe Root, who was probably being pushed in that direction.
And Taylor was mooted at one
And
point.
Taylor as well, although Taylor's he's really got to
The new
find
boy.
his feet.
It's a real left field pick.
It's a left field pick.
I don't think so.
Is it a good pick or is it a bad pick?
I think they're doing it for. I don't think they're doing it to saying, oh, he's second in command. But I think they're doing it because, as Matt Pryor was for a while, he's being keeper. He can, and don't forget, Morgan is quite often, nearly always at square cover because he's so good in that position.
Yeah.
And that's quite a difficult position to actually see what's going on, whether the ball's reversing or swinging or turning or whatever else. Whereas the keeper is in a great position to see everything, isn't he? So I think it's much more just feedback to Morgan, say, Skip might try this, might try that. So it's just, I think, a second pair of eyes and ears for Morgan.
But then we've got this a potential outcome that if Morgan got injured or got suspended, perhaps for a bit of sledging, because we know they're going to clamp down on that in this tournament, that Jos Buttler, who has no captaincy experience at all, suddenly finds himself at the Premier one-day international tournament, taking over as captain, being in charge
You know
of
what
the
it
middle.
is? It comes from this whole. You talked a minute ago about England overthinking things, right? I think England are trying to commit themselves to this new age approach to one-day international cricket, which is to be inventive, to think outside the box, slow bounces, all this stuff, going away from the fundamentals. Because I think they recognise the fact that England traditionally have focused on Test cricket, on playing old-school cricket. And they're trying to move away from that. They've got Morgan as captain. He's already an inventive player. He plays that reverse sweep better than anybody, or as well as anybody in world cricket. They're going for Jos Buttler, who's in a similar vein. He's in a similar kind of cricketer. I think it's more of a statement of intent from England that we're going into the new age of cricket. We're going to embrace all these little new intricacies in the game. We're going to plan like 21st century cricket.
Is there not a danger that you can overdo it? You think we've got to be
Of
inventive,
course there is.
so we actually go to the other extreme and we're too inventive.
Well, no, I mean, vice captain. I mean, if Morgan was thrown out for any reason, I don't think he'd become captain.
So you think they go back to Broad or someone?
I think they probably would, yeah, and they probably keep
Bell?
Morgan as, Buttler as vice captain. I mean, vice captain is a
Do
pretty.
you think that's right?
I think that's probably right because it's. I just think
It's a non-position, really, isn't
Well,
it?
I think it's also very, very difficult. And I can't think of many instances that it's been successful in any format of cricket where a keeper is a good captain. Because you've got so much to think about. It's good. I think it's good, as Pryor did for England for a while, just to well, that argues my point. I think.
Yeah.
It's the exception that proves it. Sorry, yeah,
Well, I would argue that. I think it's good that he's there as a sounding board for the captain and say, listen, Dada, he's turning or he's going gun barrel straight or whatever, or he's bowling a load of powder puff stuff and it's not coming through to me at all. And I think it's a very good sort of second in command position to have. But I don't think he would. I agree with Bear. I don't think if Morgan was struck down with Berry or whatever, we're unlikely.
Very.
Very, that's old school.
It's some sort of disease. I don't know.
It's a lack of vitamin something.
Something,
It's a real thing. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon.
Needs to get it
He
middle
doesn't
ages.
anybody offended.
Well, he looks very pasty-faced, but that's maybe because he's Irish. But anyway, but there we are. If anything did happen untoward to Morgan, I don't think that Buttler would be made captain. I think they're far more likely to give it to somebody like Root.
Okay, fair enough. Well, let's we talk about England, and it sounds like all of us have a little bit more optimism than we had 2 months ago. But let's look at the other teams that are involved, the other big teams, and the ones that we probably expect to do well. Now, I think, is it right that India are the only team to have won a World Cup as hosts? That's right, isn't it? In
That's
2011.
correct.
So Australia go in under a bit of pressure. They've got to perform in front of their own fans. But having seen them play those 3 games against England, I can't actually see a weakness in their team. Can you see a weakness in their team?
No. Well, I think the one weakness I would, bizarrely enough, is Michael Clark.
Right.
Because does Michael Clark get in your best 11? I'm not sure he does. Not in the ODIs. And I think they've got it's a slight problem they've got there. They've got some explosive batting at the top of the order and very good. They've got they bat long and deep and inventively when they need to, with the likes of Maxwell, etc. Down the order. They've got. I think their bowling is excellent. Don't get me wrong. You know, Mitchell Johnson, if he's bowling well, is unique in world cricket currently. But I do think they've got a lot of eggs in their bowling attack in the Mitchell Johnson basket. If by any chance he pulls up lame, they don't have the X factor with their bowling anymore. They just become a goodish bowling side. I think all really good one-day sides in the modern era have to have that X factor bowler, be it a Malinga, a Muralitharan, a Mitchell Johnson, somebody who the opposition is slightly worried about, and they're just thinking, well, let's see his 10 overs off. If he's 0 for 30 off his 10, actually, we'd settle for that. They don't have a replacement for Mitchell Johnson, do they?
And it's the format. Again, if you come back to the format, Australia, they could have a fantastic group stage, win all their games, but then they're going to be under intense pressure to win 3 games in a row, as you say, with the home crowd. Now, I'm not suggesting they're going to choke or anything like that. There's probably still favourites. I think they're everybody's favourites, Australia, right, to win this World Cup. So, and that's fine. I understand that, but I think it stands to reason that at some point they're going to falter, and for me, they are going to falter in the knockout stages early on. I don't worry about Michael Clark or Australia's X-factor bowlers, as you say, because they've got Mitchell Johnson and he's got reasonable support. I agree with you; they're not world beaters as Mitchell Starc and James Pattons. You know, they're not world beaters, but they're good and they know the conditions and they're smart bowlers and they've got a very good captain who will manage them properly. So I'd back them to do well.
I'm kind of worried that they will stick up. If they get to bat, they'll stick up totals so enormous that anyone will struggle to chase them down.
What I would suggest is if this was like the Premier League. Right, if this was like the Premier League and they were going to play 38 games, I think Australia would win that kind of structure of international cricket. But because there's a knockout at the end of it, I suspect they're going to fall at one of the hurdles.
So you're basically with Stuart Broad. You don't think Australia will even get to the final?
That might be the hurdle at which they falter, but I suspect they won't get to the final. I think at some point before then they'll be turned over, and they'll be against the grain, but I suspect it will happen.
I want to live in your world, Aatif. I really do.
You go along with that bet?
No, I think Australia have got a very good chance of winning it on their own soil. I mean, they've done extraordinarily well in the run-up games, tri-series against us. They've beaten all comers. They smashed South Africa last year on home soil with enormous scores, and South Africa have got a pretty good attack as well. You know, I mean, yeah, it can all go wrong.
Somebody's got to beat them up because they'd be the 4th in 5 tournaments they'd have won, won't it? Which is incredible domination, isn't it?
They won it all the way through the 90s, didn't they?
Yeah, well, late 90s and 2000, yeah, exactly. So
they lost in Sri Lanka, didn't they?
Who, Manny, is going to stop them? I mean, there's a lot of people talking up New Zealand, and we've watched a lot of New Zealand over the last few months.
New Zealand choked a lot.
And they have got a phenomenally good team for when you consider the smallest of them.
And it's a form team as well.
Yeah.
I think if you're looking for a value bet, I think they're the value because I think they'll definitely get through to the last 8. I think they're the best fielding side there. Good seam bowling attack. Spinning is a bit ordinary. And their batting, they're probably a bit reliant on McCullum going Burko at the top and Kane winning some batting through. But their batting's good.
Well, they've got people down. I mean, we've seen Luke Ronchi get a big 100. We've seen Grant Elliott get 100. Taylor, of course.
An inventive player. So they've got. They're not as good a batting lineup as either Australia or South Africa, but they could-ish, and they've got home conditions to start with. So I give them. I think they're a value bet.
Well, if you go back to the 1992 tournament, which they co-hosted with Australia, of course that was just one league of 8 teams, was it? 7 teams?
Yeah.
And New Zealand, of course, finished top of that league.
They did.
And it was only that they ended up having to play Pakistan, who were 4th, and Pakistan beat them, didn't they? So
and they were winning that game all the way through until a very young Inzi.
If I recall correctly, we won that World Cup as well in '92.
Yeah.
We can edit this out.
Who did we lose?
Edit Aatif.
Who did we beat in the final? I forget.
Yeah, but you had very good bowlers at that time, didn't you?
But it's a point actually worth making. That very World Cup, it just shows you just need to come with a run of form because Pakistan couldn't have beaten their women's team at the start of that tournament. They were utterly hopeless.
Yes.
And they were, again, even in the knockout stages, they were losing that game all the way through to New Zealand until Inzi came in and he turned the game on its head and he batted brilliantly, and then they won the final quite comfortably.
Wasn't it the tournament that England had absolutely mullered Pakistan in the group
and it
stage?
rained.
And then it rained.
Then it rained,
And
yeah.
had that game actually been completed, Pakistan would then have been out
They would have
of
been
the
out.
tournament. But it was a no result, wasn't
Absolutely. So,
it? I mean,
but that's the kind of romantic story that I think people refuse to buy into now. They just kind of accept that Australia are going to win or New Zealand's going to win. But I'm sure at the start of the '92 World Cup, people were talking about England and Australia and South Africa.
But don't you know, I'd have thought New Zealand was a romantic story. They've never won the World Cup. They pick from such a restricted playing sphere, don't they? Really, New Zealand to win the World Cup to me would be a romantic story.
Yeah, it would be.
Absolutely.
I mean, and again, I think when it would be like when Sri Lanka, or even more remarkable than when Sri Lanka won it, because as you said, I mean, their playing strength is tiny, and it would be, I think, a great fillip for world cricket if they won it.
I think it would be fantastic.
And I give them a chance.
I also think that we have to go in and stop having this monkey about our neck. You know, we started cricket and we should have won the World Cup. I mean, you just got to put it behind you and go, we haven't won the World Cup. Okay, we won a T20 finally, you know. But they've got to say, okay, maybe we're not the best team in the world. Let's just go and give it our best shot. Rather than all this pressure, we must win an ICC-sanctioned big tournament, you know.
Well, we have in effect. We've won a World 20.
You won a
World
World 20.
We won a World T20. We have, but in 50.
Well, you win it.
Well, exactly. But
That's a whole other
in 50 over cricket, we go into it like we haven't got a chance because we've never won it and we just don't know how to play the game. It seems to be that kind of mindset, which is why I think when we've got this new look side with hitters and they should try and put all that behind them and say, let's just go out there. We've got a tournament. We get to the quarters. We've got a chance.
But I think just looking at them, and again, it's very difficult sometimes to read body language, but they do look far more positive and happy in what they're trying to do than they were even 6 months ago. They don't have this burden around their neck, so I do give them, as you say, a puncher's chance because of that. Because I think they're in a far happier place.
Low expectations.
Well, maybe
that's
Yeah. Well,
maybe
it's a good place to start,
is.
you know.
A new captain, it all helps, doesn't
Sure.
it? I mean, just brings in a new regime.
Well, let's talk about the other, I suppose, if you're looking at three favourites for the tournament, I guess South Africa must be up there. Now, we all hear about the terrible choking that South Africa have done. Isn't this their time, though? Isn't this their time that they've got such an enormously strong team now?
Sure, yeah.
You can't imagine over those 7 or 8 games that they're not going to make the final. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine South Africa not making the final in this tournament?
I don't know. I mean, I don't. Again, it's the. I'm going to go back to this thing. I sound like a broken record, but it's the format. I think it will catch up with some of the big teams. You're going to see, you know, if there were seeds like Wimbledon, I don't think it'd be a 1-2 final. It's going to be like a 1-8 final, 1-6 final.
Thomas Burditch coming in.
That's right, right? So this is what I mean, because it's just that format doesn't lend itself well to teams that are good consistently, but have their off days. Now, I think South Africa had their best chance of winning a World Cup in 1999. That was their strong year. They had Lance Klusener, who was invincible at the time. They should have won that World Cup. And as you say, they choked at that classic moment where Alan Donald was there as well. And, you know, I don't think this team is a great South African team, don't get me wrong, but that was a stronger team for me. And they were the standout team. They were the team that nobody could beat. They were unbeaten up until they got to that game. So they're not unbeatable at the moment. Australia have proven that. Other teams have proven that recently, that South Africa can be turned over. I don't think they'll be going in there as favourites. They'll be one of the stronger teams for sure. Maybe that third shout behind New Zealand, maybe. But even then, I think there's other teams that are just on their heels.
I think to me, they're second favourites.
Yeah.
Ahead
I
of New
think
Zealand?
yes,
Yeah.
they are. For me, because they've got their batting. I mean, you've got, for my money, Amla in Test cricket is probably the best batsman in the world, but very, very closely followed by de Villiers, who I just think is probably I mean, if you had the most valuable cricketer in the world, he would be probably at the top of my list. I mean, I think he's a really fine player, playing at the absolute top of his form. So I think that for me, their batting, they've probably got the strongest batting unit in ODI cricket in the world currently. I think they've got very good seam attack. Philander, Morkel, Steyn. My queries would, and they're always a good fielding unit. My queries with them would be threefold. Their spinners are pretty ordinary. Do they have any decent backup seamers if one of their main seamers falls over injured? Not sure they do. or nothing in the same quality. And also, they've still got this enormous great. I was getting monkey on their back or chip on their shoulder. I hope both, really. And I totally perfectly balanced. Yeah,
Busy shoulders.
Frankly, and I hope it really gets them, and I hope they freak out mentally. But that's my twisted world in which I live.
But they're going with a different. So the thing is to counteract the psychological, the weight that's on them. They've got a new captain. They've got a different approach, as you say, one of the best balanced sides in the world. I don't make them the strongest side just looking at the sides for my money, but they're very, very good without a shadow of a doubt. Some of the best players in the world, as you say. In terms of mental strength, they can't really be lacking, can they? I mean, there's no obvious. You can't see like, okay, this guy's going to be the one to falter. You can't look at like Quinton de Kock and say he's going to be the one who's going to have a Kanye West moment.
No, but the longer it goes without them winning the big tournament, I mean, the same happened with New Zealand in rugby. They were the best side, but in between World Cups, and then they found ways of losing World Cups.
Sure.
And the same is true of South Africa. And the only way to get over that for South African cricket is actually to win it. And then people can't turn around and say, "Oh, you choked again," because you look at that squad, and you think to yourself, "Well, on paper, you're the second best side. You really should be getting to the final as a minimum requirement with the side they've got." Will they?
If they got to the final and lost a competitive match, wouldn't people just say they choked again?
Oh, of course. I think at any point, if they go out of the competition, they're always going to have choked.
If they lose in the group stages, they choke.
They lost in the group stages.
Unless they go.
Well, no.
If you're talking to a South African, of course they choke.
Yeah. There'd be one way.
You can lose without choking.
Sure.
I accept that.
There'd be one way that they wouldn't. If they were in the final, they batted first, scored 350, and then say they were up against Australia, who chased down that run. You'd say, well, you can't choke.
No.
Yeah.
Having 350 chased down.
I just think I think with like a lot of South African personality, I think it reflects. I think South African personality reflects their side. I think they are quite one-dimensional. They've got a very good A game, plan A. I don't see that they've got a plan B up their sleeves. And if plan A doesn't work, good fielding, very good seam bowling, then I'm not sure that they've got. I think Australia have got far more depth to them and plan Bs and plan Cs than South Africa.
Let's talk about the holders. Let's talk about the holders. India. Now they're an interesting case, aren't they? Because they've struggled in Australia. Okay, they had the Test series. They went straight into the Tri-series. Struggled against England as well as against Australia. Yep. What is their problem? What is your problem? What is their problem? Well, I mean, partly it's got to be down to their attack, hasn't it? Also, it's got to be down to whether people like Rohit Sharma and Virat Kohli come off. Don't you think it depends on those two?
They know how to come off I think India have that home side syndrome, where they perform beautifully in the subcontinent. They know their conditions. They have these epic. I mean, I just keep hearing about records being broken, and batting records, and even bowling records occasionally. So India is like a very flamboyant side. I'm sure they'll pull out the fans. They're the commercial centre of the tournament for sure. Well, that's what happens when you have a country of 1 billion people. But yeah, they just don't. I just don't think they have the skill set and experience overseas, specifically in Australia, and that was demonstrated by their lack of depth in the recent Tri-series. They just don't. They don't have it for me. Not in Australia.
I quite agree. I think they're looking sort of old and fragile away from home. I think their bowling is okay, but they don't have the X factor. They don't have an X factor bowler. They're a poor fielding side. They still don't. They still think they should have servants who should be fielding for them. Most of them, and their batting is far too reliant on Kohli and Dhoni. And with the best one in the world, they just can't pull them out of the fire.
Do you not think that?
I don't see them got a chance.
Do you not think? I was saying in the Tri-series, one of the problems they came up against was losing Rohit Sharma to injury very early on in that tournament. If he's back and fit and firing, it gives a whole new. Face to their upper order, I think.
If you talk about psychology, does it have any bearing that he has the world record?
Possibly so, but there are a lot of ifs in what you just said there. If he's back, if he's fit, if he's firing, and I just think with that bowling and fielding attack, they'll be chasing some big totals.
But is that not their strength?
Their strength is their strength, but. Yeah, I mean, Cody looked really good in the Test series, scored an awful lot of runs. I mean, it's not like with the balls that they use in the World Cup and the fact that they're harder, fast wickets. It's not like when they're in England, the ball's hooping around, they can't play a swimming ball. They actually seem to like the ball coming onto the bat, although they've still got bloody serious rain in the middle order who can't play a short ball for toffee.
Or a turning ball.
Well, yeah, well, seemingly a Mo and Annie ball, yeah. So, you know, they've got some good batsmen and their strength is definitely chasing, but their bowling attack looks pretty ordinary.
Well, they've lost Ishant Sharma as well, to a degree.
In those conditions, I mean, there's no real pace. The ball doesn't really do a lot. I don't understand why they don't have Ashwin. He's a good all-rounder in that respect.
You want the bits and pieces cricketer there as
and
well.
he's a good ODI bowler as well.
So what I would say, though, is for India, potentially, if they got their win over Pakistan on the 15th, they'd almost settle for that. Yeah. And I'd say the same would be true for Pakistan. I feel like that game has more importance to both sides, initially at least, in the World Cup. If they could just win that game, everything else is forgiven.
One of the marvellous subplots of the World Cup.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, India, of course, have never lost to Pakistan in a World Cup. So it's a sore point for Pakistanis. The Star Sports recently made a commercial almost mocking Pakistani fans for never being able to set off the fireworks. There's a box of fireworks. It's a great commercial. I'll show it to you guys later.
Do you have confidence they'll do that this time, though?
I think it'll be a close game,
right.
For sure, because I don't see India performing as well as they have done of late. As you say, they're struggling in Australia. Pakistan, I would have said the same for until these last two warm-up games where they've beaten Bangladesh and England in quite impressive manner. So I think Pakistan have as good a chance as they've ever had. But having said that, on the day, these games can, there's no way of knowing which way it's going to go. It's like a Federer-Nadal match. You never know where it's going to go.
Do you just think that India have that slightly greater experience of knowing how to win?
No, I wouldn't say so. I mean, maybe within this context of an international tournament, sure, maybe. But overall, Pakistan still hold a superior ODI record over India. They've been winning more of their games recently. They've got an inspirational leader of their own now. Who knows how to chase as well, just like Dhoni. Misbah knows how to chase. So I think Pakistan not only have a decent shot at beating India, but if they were to kind of cajole their way to the quarterfinals, they could give some of the big boys a run for their money.
Beat anyone on their day?
Oh, without
Absolutely.
any question. And Pakistan, if they don't beat India this time round, you've got to ask, when, because they should be beating this Indian side. Because I think India look old, tired, and pissed off that they're away from home.
They've been away a long time.
They have, I know, but hey ho, that's then don't sign up for international cricket.
Well,
and Wags have been banned as well this time, so they're not allowed to take the wives and girlfriends with them.
Right.
So one thing I will say about Pakistan is I suspect they will probably lose to an associate at some point. They will probably lose to an associate at some point, but I wouldn't be surprised if that happens and they also make the World Cup final.
Yeah, well, absolutely. No, that's a good call. What about Sri Lanka? I mean, they're a team on the decline, would you say? I haven't been that impressed with the way they played in New Zealand. Okay, they beat England 5-2 before Christmas, but
that was in Sri Lanka.
Were rubbish. That was in Sri Lanka. Are they too reliant on the old men?
Yeah. For me, they are. They got so many eggs in that particular basket, Hendo. They don't. They're still a decent fielding side, but I think their bowling looks pretty ordinary these days. And if they lose early wickets and their big three are nicked off early, crikey, I think they're in real trouble.
The captain, though, Angelo Matthews.
Yeah, he's
brilliant,
top ODI battery or second ODI top batsman in the world this year.
Who is, sorry?
Angelo Matthews.
Yeah, good cricketer. I like his attitude.
I think that's a key.
But I just don't think they've got enough.
He is, however, one of those people who's grown with the captaincy, isn't he? Because there was always this talk about him, the potential that he had, but he's only really ever shown that potential since he's become captain, I think.
I think that's one of the ingredients, really, of a team that's going to win this World Cup, is having an inspirational captain. And Sri Lanka do have that. So while they would never be your favourites, they probably would make a top 4. Favourites.
Well, let's talk about captains. Jason Holder, West Indies.
Ah.
Now, I'm curious. I mean, I've heard him speak, and he sounds like a sort of a guy who's probably older than his years in some respects. He's a big guy. He's a decent bowler. He might get a little bit of action from bouncy Australian pitches. But I mean, can you bring people like Chris Gale, who's he's done everything for the West Indies? Is he really going to fit into that side with Jason Holder, age 23, as captain?
Well, I think you've got to see the political backdrop to the West Indies, Hendo, and he's surely just the company man, isn't he, Holder? He's been given the captaincy because the board think they can control him. They palpably couldn't control their players in India, and they came home in total disarray. They banned or dropped, for disciplinary reasons, Dwayne Bravo and Kieran Pollard, both who would walk into their side. I think the West Indies are ripe for the taking there, because I can't see that. I mean, Chris Gale is pretty laid back at the best of times and uninvolved, you might describe him in certain types of cricket. But I think now, particularly with a young pup as captain, I can see him just snoozing at first slip and just not giving the stuff.
Until he gets the bat, basically.
Yeah. And then he'll liven everything out the park.
Yeah, exactly.
And he won't run any singles.
To use one of your own things, X Factor players.
Yeah.
They don't come bigger, more X Factor than Chris Gill.
No, they don't. But I mean,
He can bowl a bit as well.
But he's got to do it eight games in a row. You know?
Well, in theory, he's got to do 2 and then 3 games in a row.
Yeah.
Which isn't impossible. You might still see them in the quarterfinals, but I guess if you were betting on one team of the big teams not to make it to the quarterfinals, they'd be the ones.
But is their first game not against Ireland?
It is.
That is not a banana skin. And ironically, Ireland are coached by Phil Simmons. Indeed.
Yeah.
So he's got a sort of foot in either camp in a way, but obviously.
He's a professional.
He is, of course he is. And he's done a very good job with Ireland. Ireland are not a bad side. And again, if you're looking for one of the associates to beat one of the big boys, I think that's not a bad bet.
But is this not one of the sadnesses of this World Cup? Is that in the last few years, the West Indies, there's been zero interest in Test cricket in the West Indies really for the last few years. They were performing quite well in the 1 day and 20 over formats. But now it's like they've ripped out their heart from within, isn't it? And are they really just going to be there to make up the numbers this time?
Well, they've got to. Maybe this is a weak. Let's not beat about the bush. This is a really weak, ill-placed, ill-prepared West Indies team. They're ripe for the taking. The associates will be looking at them, thinking, right, this is the team that we're going to target and put all of our resources into. Having said that, West Indies have pedigree. They won 2 tournaments. They know how to win. They won an ICC tournament recently against all the odds. It didn't make, nobody would have put them anywhere near the favourites list, and nobody would this time as well. But they know how to win. They've got a very proud heritage. They've got strong, passionate cricketers. It's not impossible that they do well. I wouldn't suggest they're going to win, but I wouldn't completely rule them out of making the
I wonder. I take issue.
stage.
Have they really got those passionate cricketers? I mean, you look at their defeat by England on Monday. And Richie Richardson, their coach, comes out and says, "Well, we don't want to peak too soon." Now that might have been just
Get out,
it might have
Richie.
been, he might have been saying it while winking or whatever. But that's been seized upon by those that would criticise and say, "Well, look at this. They're laid back to the point of being comatose."
Well, you have to be, don't you? You can't if you've got that kind of team and that kind of setup. You can't take yourself too seriously. You can't, or your chances too seriously. If you build up an expectation for the West Indies cricket-loving public that yes, we're going to this World Cup to win the World Cup, you're setting yourself up for a massive failure.
Yeah, I just wrote down a few notes, and they all began with a D: disarray, disunity, and distrust. And sadly, that's what now typifies West Indies cricket. Because I mean, what they still can't get their heads around. Look, there's darn all money in West Indies cricket. We know that, and they've still not really come to grips with the fact that because of that, they can't stop their players, and why the players are perfectly within their rights to go off and earn big bucks in the IPL. And they've never really got their heads round that. And you've got the likes of it's Clive Lloyd, who's look, he was an iconic figure within West Indies cricket. I would suggest that his image is now getting somewhat tarnished, and rightly so, because I don't think he's done himself or West Indies cricket any favour in the way he's acted. And they simply have to get, after this tournament, they have to sit round a table, whatever happens, and sit round a table and bash these out some sort of agreement which allows their players to go off to the IPL to earn their money over there and yet still be available for some form of West Indies cricket. Because otherwise, I can see them just actually packing the game up internationally. Because you can't have too many more examples of them just saying we're not playing a Test series at the 11th hour as they did against India.
It's going off into a whole different area, but I mean, could you see a situation where the West Indies becomes represented purely by an island, perhaps a Jamaica or a Barbados? maybe that's an argument for another time.
Yeah.
perhaps. But anyway,
Next podcast.
We ought to be. We need to wrap
yeah. Well,
up.
let's just talk briefly about the minnows. I mean, I know that you're backing Ireland maybe to take out the West Indies. We've seen Scotland have a good win in the warm-ups over Ireland. I mean, not just the minnows, but we've got Bangladesh, of course, and Zimbabwe. They've had a win over Sri Lanka. But the UAE is a team that's interested you, Aatif.
Yeah.
And you've been talking about one of the guys who's in their team. Is he
Yeah,
a
so the-
44-year-old or something?
I think he's 40. Yeah, he's 44.
Right.
Hope for us yet, Hendo.
Yes, indeed.
He's the captain of UAE. He's 44. Khurram Khan, right?
Right.
And Aqib Javed, Pakistani fast bowler, is the
Oh,
coach
yes.
of UAE.
Right.
He's 43. So the captain is actually older than the coach. But the thing is, and Aqib Javed commented on this recently. He's in the best shape of his life. He's on a cricket pitch. He looks invincible. He's got really good temperament. He recently became the first UAE player to score a one-day international century, which is a great achievement. But the UAE are not the sexy associates. That's
Yeah.
Ireland. That's Afghanistan. To a lesser extent, that's Scotland.
Yeah.
But it's not UAE. UAE is not
rarely
the sexy
hear those
associates.
words in the same
Sexy in
sentence.
Scotland.
Yeah,
Sexy in
it's
Scotland.
sexy in Scotland. You really do. But there's the thing. So UAE aren't the ones that people are interested in because they expect them to lose. It's the second. But they forget it's the second time in the World Cup. They've got some experience of being in these kind of situations. For a while, the ICC was in the UAE. It was centred there. So there's been a
Still
lot of
is.
development. A lot of cricket is played in the UAE. Of course, Pakistan play all the games there, and of course, the team is made up of a lot of expats. A lot of people who work on construction sites and for airlines and taxi drivers. So it's very much a nomad team, but they've got this incredible will and spirit where they'll work extraordinarily long shifts. Then they'll drive 4 hours and spend another 4 hours training, go home at midnight, and then do it all over again 5-6 days a week. And they work that hard to get to this World Cup. This captain's story, I mean, there's an article on Cricket Info, which I urge you all to read about Khurram Khan and his journey. It's extraordinary. I don't think a team that puts that much passion and effort into their cricket is there to make up the numbers. They're there to try and win a game and to put the kind of performance forward that people will remember. And that's why I'm looking forward to seeing some of their cricket, UAE.
Absolutely. But how important is this tournament to the minnows? Because we know that in 2019, these teams aren't going to be playing again. It's going to be cut back down again.
All the more reason to
But
demonstrate.
can they embarrass the ICC here? Can
They
they
should.
go out there and perform well as a group to the extent that people start saying, come the World Cup in England in 2019, that we've got to have a wider
That should be the
sphere?
goal.
Hendo, I'd believe that when I see it, because we were told several years ago that we were going to have a World Championship of Test cricket.
true.
That didn't come to pass.
Still
did it?
waiting.
So I'll take everything that the ICC says with a pinch of salt, and I think there's an awful lot of negotiation between now and 2019 to take place. So
Yeah, the Champions
wait to
Trophy
see.
was supposed to be cut, wasn't it? And that's back in.
Indeed. So who knows on that?
And crucially, it was the strong performance of the Champions Trophy as a format. So if the associates perform strongly, there's a realistic carrot there for them of being involved in the future. So
We've probably been burbling almost long enough. But before we bring this to a close, I'd like you to turn your minds back years, or maybe lots of years, maybe not so many years for some of you, and tell me your most memorable World Cup moment. Just one from what, 1975? This is the 11th tournament. There's 10 tournaments for you to choose from. Can you give me your most memorable World Cup moment? I think you've narrowed it down to 2 or 3, haven't you, Manny?
Well, yeah, I have. One would, just because I'm that bitter, it would be Gavaskar scoring 36 not out in 60 overs, chasing 3 million against England in 1975, and you refused to go for them, which I thought was just so ridiculous. But that apart, they all my comedy moments centre on South Africa. I'm delighted to say.
Oh, no.
Mine do
There's gonna be
too.
some crossover.
If I have to pick one, it's so difficult. I'm going to exclude 1999, which I found very funny, them choking there. But I'll go for 1992, England playing them in the semi-final, rain affected. It's before pre-Duckworth Lewis, if you recall.
Yes.
Went off, and Richie Beno had come up with this a method, this system, which no one understood, including Richie Beno. And then everyone trooped back onto the pitch, And we were all waiting to see, well, what is the new target? Da, 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 da. And they trooped onto the pitch, and I remember, do you remember this guy got a huge mountain of Brian McMillan?
Oh, yeah.
Good all-rounder,
Yeah.
good slip fielder, decent seam
Very
bowler,
solid.
good bat. He could hit the ball out of the park, and he was striding out there thinking, well, you know, we probably need 11 or 12 off one over. That's doable with me there. And then it suddenly flashed up on the board, 24 off one ball. And
they'd only required about 30 off 3 overs or something, hadn't they?
And I think, if memory serves me correctly, he looked up and he just slung his bat down on the ground. And I think he blocked that particular ball. Well, it was fair enough, but it was, that for comedy moment, and it included South Africa, that would be mine.
Bess, South Africa's figures in yours?
Yeah, well, of course. Well, I mean, mine I am going to include 1999, because 1999, I remember watching the group stages, and Australia were clearly the best team in it. They managed to screw up one game. There was the Herschel Gibbs drop. You dropped the World Cup. Then it got to the semi-finals. I put money on Australia to win the tournament. Basically, I had 2 bets going, and I couldn't get an accumulator, which was really annoying. But I had Pakistan to get to the Pakistan-Australia final, and Australia to win, because Pakistan were clearly mercurial at the time.
Yeah.
What do you mean at the time? How dare you?
Under pressure against Australia, who were clearly the best team in the world, I thought they were going to lose. So Australia had lost 2 games. The odds went up to like 10 to 1. So I was like, okay, money on Australia. That's the final. And then it came to the semi-final, of course. And at the end of that game, I was literally, there was a friend of mine was around, and I was cowering behind the sofa in that last over that Warney was bowling. And then it came down to the last ball. And what did Donald do? Didn't run. Cleveson ran himself out, and I was just running around the room like a lunatic, knowing that I got one of my bets right, and that probably Australia were going to win the final. So I had £100 in the bank. So that's my memorable moment.
I'd like to have been there to see that, actually.
Yeah.
We might see it again
Yeah.
this tournament.
Well, the bear running.
The bear running. Not so much the
Cowering behind the sofa.
Aatif, what about you?
Well, you won't believe it. I was thinking of exactly the same moment, one of my favourite moments in the World Cup. But it's not so much funny. It's the moment that got me really passionate about cricket, and that was watching Shoaib Akhtar in the 1999 World Cup. It was just extraordinary. That tournament, up until the final, belonged to him. Him and some would say Lance Klusener, but in terms of just something that you just couldn't take your eyes away from. It's like watching The Godfather for the first time, you know? It's just such an extraordinary, visceral experience to see this really fast, exciting, bustling, running up bowler. And he was at his peak. That tournament was him at his peak. And the kind of dismissals, I mean, and the moment that stood out the most for me was him against Stephen Fleming. He's bowling round the wicket to the left armour, and he just the scorching in-swinging Yorker, which removed the leg stump. It was just a breathtaking moment. I mean, I just literally took my breath away. I was just standing there gasping in just orgasmic delight. You know, it's magnificent. And that's the kind of moment I look forward to seeing again in this World Cup.
Well, the one that comes to my mind is when I was at college in '87, sitting in my room at the top of this horrible little back-to-back house, watching the World Cup it was India, wasn't it?
It was.
And we'd had a party, and it was like I'd repaired from the party to my room, shut everyone else out, to watch the cricket. And of course, England heading towards victory, and then Mike Gatting, with his perfectly placed reverse sweep. And that was the end of England's chances.
Of
And
Alan
that
Border.
probably- of Alan Border, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And that was when you realised that yet again England had flattered to deceit.
Yeah. Can I just mention this dispatches, because again, South Africa failing to get through in their home World Cup in 2003 because they couldn't read or write. Do you remember Sean Pollock not being able to actually understand Duckworth Lewis? You actually the rain came down. He said, no, and the umpire said, "You can come off now." And he walked off, and they
Yeah.
lost by 1 run. I mean, that's just joyous, wasn't it?
Well, they have found inventive ways to lose. haven't they? I mean,
That's
they're not
that's
just
genius.
chokers. They're actually chokers on a grand scale, really. I mean, they're not just chokers. They're just stupid at times.
Well, indeed, if you can't read or write, you deserve to lose a game, probably.
And it's fair to be critical of them because they do have some of the best resources in the world. They have some of the greatest players in the world. It's okay for us to laugh at them when they do things like that.
Okay,
Indeed.
one more thing before we go. I want a star of the tournament and an unlikely star of the tournament. Star of the tournament, Bear, who do you imagine is going to set this World Cup alight?
Maybe de Villiers, you got to go for, haven't you?
Maybe de Villiers?
Yeah.
Aatif?
I would go along with, just to mix it up, I'll say Hashim Amla because I do see a dominant South African performance. So I think Hashim Amla is going to look good.
Manny?
I'm going to back my hunch, and I'm going to go Brendan McCullum.
Ooh, that's a good one.
That's a good one.
That's a good one. Unlikely star of the World Cup. someone that's going to come out of left field and do something quite remarkable. Manny?
Oh, crikey. Out of left field. I'll go, well, he's in left field. I'm going to go Kevin O'Brien. I just think he might just tee off against the West Indies.
Aatif?
Yeah, I'm standing by my man, the UAE captain, Karim Khan. I think, hey, why not, right?
Why not?
Why not
Absolutely.
Karim Khan?
Back him.
Yeah.
Like it.
Bear?
Oh, an unlikely star. I'm going to go for Jimmy Taylor for England.
Jimmy Taylor?
Yeah, I think he could,
Interesting one.
because I just think he's got it all in his locker, and everyone doesn't. Well, people do expect him to do much, but he's not really a star on a world scene.
No, he's
and this
not.
could be the time when he comes out and goes, well, you know what, I'm only 5'2", but here we go.
Only 5'2", eyes are blue. But I will go and say it's finally got to happen. But out of left field, all the way from Essex, comes Ravi Bopara.
Oh,
Ravi
yes.
Bopara.
Now that would be a
He
story.
will
That's
be
a great
the
pick.
story of this World Cup. You heard it here first
love
on
to see
Guerilla
it.
Cricket's podcast.
If he pulls it out of fire and England win the World Cup, it'll be Ravi
Knighthood.
Bopara. Can you
Knighthood
imagine?
Knighthood for Sir Ravi.
Sir Ravi.
How great would that be?
Arise, Sir Ravi. Oh, you
Sir
already
Ravi.
are. Okay. On that note, we should
wake up.
We should wake up and go and have a cup of tea or something like that, or a drink. It's 10 to 4. I've got to go to work. So it just remains for me to say thank you to the Bear.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you to Aatif Nawaz.
My pleasure.
Thank you to Manny Cohen.
Pleasure.
Thank
See
you
you.
to me, Guerilla Hendo, for hosting this. And we will be with you at about 3:15 on Saturday morning for the first game that we're covering, which is Australia-England. Before that, the New Zealand game against Sri Lanka will have got underway. But that's our first game. We've also got India-Pakistan that weekend. And hopefully, perhaps, we will take in Ireland against the West Indies if we can find enough people to do it. We should also say to people that you can take part in a new game, can't you, Beck?
Yeah, well, we're hoping it'll be up and running. In fact, I'll make a phone call
please,
about
it's gonna
that.
be up and running.
It's pretty much going to be up and running at some point, and it should be for the first game, but we will tweet about it as soon as we know.
Okay. On that basis, thank you very much, and
Pleasure.
we'll speak to you again on Saturday morning.
World Cup.
Whee!
World Cup.